Joining us now, Jeff Paterson, one half of the Rink-Wide Duo with Andrew Wadden, covering the game last night. And Jeff, you tweeted what I was thinking. Boy, that reminded me of a Bruce Boudreau game from earlier this year.
Yeah, they should have worn their reverse retros last night because it was a throwback to October and November. And it was a step back, too. Now, all the good that Rick Tocchet has instilled in this group, I don't think goes out the window on one night. And keep in mind, too, that was their 9th game in 15 nights with a fair bit of travel in there. They went down to Southern California and Arizona and back, and then to the Midwest as well. Every team's got quirks and tough stretches of their schedule, but 9 and 15 is an awful lot, and it did kind of look like maybe mentally, even more than physically, last night it caught up with them because they just didn't have it. And you look at the goals that the St. Louis Blues scored. Guillaume Brisebois on the first one, just a brutal giveaway. That kind of stuff can't happen at the NHL level, but it did. But it went way deeper than that. The second goal was just a carnival in front of Thatcher Demko. Canucks had a bunch of chances to clear the puck. They couldn't, and it wound up on the stick of Justin Falk. There was a leaky penalty kill that we haven't seen of late, but that looked like early season penalty killing for the Vancouver Canucks. The Brock Boeser giveaway that wound up on the stick of Verana in the slot. And then in overtime, confusion in the defensive zone as well. So an awful lot of that. Even with Thatcher Demko back, he couldn't mop up and save the day. And I say all of that. In the third period at 5-3, he made a couple of stops, one off Buchnevich and one off Kapanen, that if they score there, overtime's not even in the cards for the Canucks. So Thatcher Demko did step up and make some saves. But guys, second time this season and the first since the third game of the season in Washington that Demko was shelled for 6 goals in a hockey game.
It was one of those nights where there's a lot of stats padding, even in an OTL. But it has brought to the fore so many thresholds that, we were wondering, could they reach? And obviously people are concentrating on Pettersson and 100 points, but that much closer for Kuzmenko to 40 goals. Can Hughes get to 80 points after he sets the Canucks defenseman record? Can JT Miller, he's on a 2-point per game stretch over 3 weeks now. If he continues that, he gets to 90 points again, guys. It's been an unbelievable finish here.
Yeah, and I would lump Brock Boeser into that as well. Brock Boeser is
career high.
4 from a career high, and with 16 goals, he scored in 3 straight. 20's not out of the question, and 20's not 30. I get that, but it wasn't that long ago. He was sitting on a dozen, and we wondered if he was going to get to 15, and so again, it's garbage time in the big picture here. It is stats padding, as you say. Why couldn't these guys have done a lot of this early in the season, and maybe they wouldn't be in the same boat? But yeah, it certainly is some intrigue here. And with a 5-game homestand coming up and a relatively soft schedule along the way, a lot of those individual milestones, I think, are within reach. And for Pettersson, this one's important to me, and I hope it's important to him. But he's at 95, so he's given himself a little cushion here. It doesn't even have to be a point a game. There can be a night or two where he's held off the score sheet. But the way the schedule is shaking down, 5 in a row at home now, and then they finish on the road with 3. I really hope that he gets to the century mark.
Yes. In
front of the home fans at Rogers Arena. If it happens in those final 3 road games, it happens, but then he just scatters for the summer, and he doesn't really get to share that moment with the fan base. And look, there hasn't been a lot to cheer about at Rogers Arena this season. There have been some exciting games, but I think that would be a pretty cool moment for both Pettersson and the organization for him to get to 100 points for the first time on home ice. So I do hope it happens over the next 5 games.
I would bet it does at this point. What I love as I look at his stats line for the season, that's your perfect superstar to me. Obviously everybody would like 50 goals and 70 assists or something like that, but within the reasonable realm of that distribution of 35 goals and 60 assists that he's at right now, that's a guy that's helping you in every facet. The ratio there is perfect, isn't it?
Well, speaking of perfect, that pass to Kuzmenko in the third period last night, the chemistry that those two guys have forged, but, that was Henrik Sedin level, just sort of that ESP and that understanding of where your teammate's going to go and then put that pass into space, draw guys to you, and then you had Tyler Myers going right up the middle with the center drive, create some space, and then Pettersson puts the puck right onto the stick of Kuzmenko, who scored from, gasp, 10 feet out instead of in the blue paint, where he has scored so many of his goals, including the first one last night. But yeah, look, I guess I thought based on previous seasons that Elias Pettersson could be a 90-point guy. I didn't know if he could be a 100-point guy. I certainly have learned over the years not to bet against him because he's as driven as anybody on this hockey club. And so, I mean, this is great for him that I don't want to say he's overachieved, but I do think he has sort of even raised the bar for a number of people in this market of what's possible for him. And, he's just at that point in his career, he's not even 25 yet, where there should be a run of potential 100-point seasons. Like, I don't think this is any sort of outlier. I don't think this is one and done. I think Elias Pettersson's entering a window here where he can be a 100-point player for a handful of seasons. And, of course, he's going to want to get paid like a 100-point player.
Mm-hmm. That's just it. And I'll finish the thought. He doesn't look like he's needing to grind out these points. Like, it just seems relatively routine, if that's fair to him. Like, I don't think that he doesn't seem like a guy who's on a scorcher. Like, JT Miller seemed like he was on a heater last year. Everything he threw at the net seemed to go in, and reminded me of Kessler's 40-goal campaign. It doesn't feel like that for Pettersson. It just feels like he's just doing his thing,
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think the great ones make it look easy, and he's certainly putting himself, in that short list of players in the National Hockey League that, are achieving greatness. And, we look at Pettersson and we marvel, 100-point season, this is incredible. And then the Edmonton Oilers are going to have 300-point guys, which is just mind-blowing in this era. And we'll see if any of that matters when the games really matter for the Oilers here in 3 weeks' time. But, phenomenal seasons, obviously, for McDavid and Draisaitl, and the Nuge had the big night in Vegas last night. I mean, Elias Pettersson's had a couple of big nights. He's had the 2 5-point nights, and so that's certainly, there's 10% of his point total on the season in those 2 games. But I think anybody that's going to get close to 100 points is going to have a couple of nights where, they just go off statistically and they get some bounces. But you're right, for the most part, it doesn't feel like there's an absolute grind. And the other thing, too, is, he's going to get to 100 points. He's sitting on 5 power play goals, which is, again, mind-boggling that, he could be a 40-goal scorer and maybe he adds to his power play total with 8 games remaining. But whatever the case, he's not going to be a 15 or a 20 power play goal guy. He's got 5 this year. And so that's certainly an area where I think next year, he could see a spike and get that power play boost and drive those point totals even higher.
Bad hit last night from Jake Neighbors, and Kyle Burrows comes to the rescue. And we talked about this a little last week, Jeff, but it looks like Kyle Burrows is doing everything he can to carve a niche and try and get a contract for next year.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's been the ultimate teammate. And again, last night, and man, that was a pretty good middleweight scrap. You don't see guys just stand back and trade him an awful lot in the NHL these days. But Kyle Burrows, he's a gamer, there's no doubt. Leads the hockey club in fights, 7 this season. They've had 30 as a team, and 7 of them have been involving Kyle Burrows. Now, obviously, fighting is sliding out of prominence in the National Hockey League, but it's always going to be a physical game, and there's always going to be that element to the sport. So, after they traded Luke Schenn, they don't have a ton of toughness. Let's be honest here. And you think of who's behind the bench now and the way that he played the game. I wonder how much Rick Tocchet values that. We know that he loves wall work and board battles and those types of things. But the thing about toughness is it has to be in your lineup. And Kyle Burrows has only played half the games for the Vancouver Canucks this season. And I think back to the last homestand, he had to race to the arena and have a staffer park his car to play because Noah Juleson was supposed to be in the lineup ahead of him. So, where does he fall on the organizational depth chart? Is he looking for more of an opportunity? He's a right-shot defenseman. We know that those are coveted around the National Hockey League. I think he's shown he can play at this level. And so I do wonder if he's going to shop himself on the open market. We saw contracts for others, and apparently there hasn't been much in the way of contract discussions between the Burrows camp and the Vancouver Canucks. And so part of it, too, is trying to figure out that right side next year. Like Philip Hronek's here for sure. They want to get out from under the contract of Tyler Myers. We don't know about Ethan Bear and his future and his price point. I mentioned Noah Juleson. So where does Burrows fall in all of this? What does the organization truly think of him? Can he play? Can he be anything close to an every night guy in this league? Or, is this his lot in life that he's a depth defenseman who gets spot duty, and when he's in there, he's willing to stick up for his teammates? So I think there's a lot of questions around Kyle Burrows, but the one thing you cannot question is the guy's heart and his willingness to have the back of his teammates.
Yeah, no, I think it is going to be his lot in life. Jeff, how closely are you following the Canucks draft lottery odds?
Yeah, not on a nightly basis. I mean, I look at where they are in the standings and understand what that means in terms of the odds, but ultimately they're going to play the games, and I think by this point we know that with the skill level they possess, the players are going to play to win. And another night last night where look who dots the score sheet. Kuzmenko with a pair, Hughes with a pair, Boeser. We've said this all along, that they've got too much top-end talent. And most nights, Thatcher Demko has held up his end of the bargain. It didn't happen for him last night, but they still managed to get a single point. So I guess I'm surprised at the outrage still in the market. Like, I understand the frustration that the potential to absolutely have the bottom fall out was there, but it's been a month now. I mean, they're 10-2-1 in their last 13 hockey games. This shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that they've got star power, guys that are pushing for some of those individual milestones that we mentioned. Guess what? They're going to win a few more here before all is said and done. So, I'm monitoring it, but for me, it's kind of like musical chairs. I'll wait for the music to stop in 8 games, and then we'll sort of see where the dust has settled.
You're right. The way that it's unfolded has fostered the frustration, but they were probably an 82-point team anyway, right? They were probably a 500 team from the get-go, and they just found their level in a very circuitous route, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, people point to all the squandered leads early in the season. I mean, some of those should have been wins. They should have. And so there should have been a few more points there. But then last night, they're down 5-2. Good team would put the Canucks away, and the Blues certainly have their warts, and so the Canucks were able to chip away. So there have been comebacks. There have been squandered leads. But through it all, like the players at the outset of the season, I don't think were wrong when they sat there on that first day before training camp and talked about playoffs. Anything short of playoffs would be a disappointment. I think a lot of people felt that they were going to be on the cusp. So, in my mind, I kind of thought that they were going to be a 90-ish point team. We talked about the offensive flair they had. We all expected that Thatcher Demko was going to pick up where he left off. The questions were about the defense. And, the defense has overgone a makeover throughout the course of the season. There are still questions. It needs an upgrade. There's no doubt about that. But, yeah, I mean, they have underperformed. There's no doubt about that. I think we all know the reasons why. But in the big picture, yeah, I mean, at the outset of the season, nobody was talking about, truly being in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. We all loved the storyline of North Vancouver boy, and wouldn't that be incredible? But I don't think at the outset of the season anybody truly believed that the Vancouver Canucks had a legitimate shot of significant lottery odds.
Let me ask you this. The schedule is a little bit more difficult here the rest of the way. They've got 5 games against playoff or effectively playoff teams, 2 against Calgary, who are officially one notch below, of course, but they're battling hard. So 5 pretty tough games, and then 3 kind of birds against Chicago, the Ducks, and the Coyotes, depending on how you view them. But because of the way that they do finish on the road, like you mentioned, or do we see some mysterious injuries going out on the road there in the final 3 games? Like guys that are facing milestones, they probably continue to play on. But do you think there's maybe a more spotty lineup on the road when there's absolutely nothing left to play for, and maybe there's a rung or two to be gained? Would that be the final hurrah in the tankathon, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there are organizational decisions that have to be made there. There are no questions about that. So, let's see what the homestand does in terms of the health and well-being and the availability of players. But, yeah, I mean, I do think that there would have to be some decisions. And wouldn't that be something that if the Canucks and the Coyotes went into that final game level and, it mattered to both of them.
It's Tucson versus Abbotsford.
Oh, my goodness. What kind of lineups exactly? Pulling people from the stands to dress for the respective hockey clubs. It's so tough these days to get information when they're out on the road just because nobody's following this team in terms of media. And so, we're not seeing an awful lot, hearing an awful lot from Rick Tocchet about some of the, there are 8 games to go. They're back home now. I think finally we'll get an update and probably a definitive answer on a guy like OEL. I think we all believe that he's done for the season, but there was some suggestion that he hoped he was coming back. Christian Wolanin, get an update on that. I imagine Travis Dermott is done. He's just been a forgotten man through all of this. Vasily Podkolzin, what's the extent of his injury? So, it's been tough to sort of glean. Podkolzin's missed the last couple of games. We were led to believe somewhere along the line on the road trip that it wasn't serious. But, for his sake, I certainly hope that there are some games left for him to continue to try to, finish his season strong and head into the offseason. But Aid McDonough, how much is he going to play? I saw some people upset that he didn't stay in the lineup. I think that was the plan all along. They got him his debut. They got his family to Chicago to be there. But I don't think that it was ever the intention of the organization that he was going to play every game after the game in Chicago. So he'll get some home games. I have no doubt about that. But yeah, I mean, there are lots of moving parts here, lots of pieces to all of this. And then through it all is, do nagging injuries become a little bit more, that there's just no point in playing guys? I think some of those questions will be revealed, or the answers to those questions will be revealed here in short order.
Marvelous stuff. Jeff, thank you for this. We will catch up tomorrow.
All right, guys. Thanks.